we're going to move right along with our next guest. And for those of you all who watch the show, you all know that Rhonda and I went to New Orleans about a month ago to the Black Librarians National Conference. And we've already had two people on the show that we met there. And Autumn Allen is another person that we met there, and she has a beautiful book coming out. That's what caught our attention, is how beautiful the book was. And she's going to tell us about it. And Autumn,
Yes,
welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So now, I how do you pronounce the? Is it Ayo's Adventure?
Io's Adventure, yes.
Ayo's, okay. And that's the book that you have that's being released on the 17th of this month.
Right. And that's a book that I edited and art directed. So it's not written by me, but that's one of the ones I worked on as a publisher.
Okay. And you had a copy of it at the conference. Do you have a copy of it with you?
I don't, unfortunately. Yeah, I
So do
gave
you
it away.
have which one your book is called Step on Board?
Yes, I have a picture book called Step on Board coming out in hopefully 2025. And my debut novel came out last year. It's called All You Have to Do.
Right.
Young
Okay.
adult.
And that's a hardcover.
Right. Yeah.
So that show that book again. It's a beautiful cover.
Thank you. It's called
All
All
you
You
have
Have to Do.
have to do. And so is it for middle grade or young adult?
Middle graders can read it. It's targeted for young adult, so teenagers, 14 to 18, but it's really crossover, and it's pretty clean, so can go down to middle school. But elders enjoy it. It's historical fiction set in 1968 and 1995, so prior generations enjoy sort of reliving our experiences by reading it. So it's really all ages.
Oh, okay. So what's the storyline for that book?
So you have two different protagonists. Gibran in 1995 is a young Black student at a predominantly white prep school in Massachusetts in 1995. And he wants to go to the Million Man March. And the school says, absolutely not. It does not align with our values. And he starts a sort of campaign on campus to get them to recognize that what the Black students need is not being met because the culture of the school is based on white culture. And then Kevin in the 1968 storyline is at Columbia University just when Dr. King was assassinated. And many of you may be aware of the campus protests that happened at that time. There were a lot of uprisings in inner cities, and then there were also protests on college campuses. So he's involved in a campus protest, and they sit in the administration building for a week with demands for the school to stop taking land in Harlem and to get out of the Vietnam War. And so it's sort of their stories. It's an intergenerational family story about the ways in which young Black people try to connect with movements for Black liberation when their families are trying to sort of usher them toward sort of a middle class lifestyle.
Interesting. Now the young man on the left side, which the side when it's facing me, it was on the left.
Mm-hmm.
He's white. Is
No,
that
no, they're both Black.
they're
So
both black.
yeah,
Okay.
just
Okay. I
white
couldn't really tell
skin.
because of the black and white motif
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
other side. I wasn't sure to see that. So I didn't know if I was trying to figure out how their paths cross.
yeah.
So
That's
okay.
part of the fun of reading it. So I'm not going to give it away, but I
Oh,
will
okay.
say it's an intergenerational family story.
Okay. Now what inspired you to come up with that plot?
Basically, the 1995 plot was based on my family. I am third in a set of four siblings. And we all went to prep schools in Massachusetts, and some of us had an easier time getting through than others. My brothers, in particular, sort of didn't follow the trajectory that you expect coming out of prep schools, going to colleges and moving on to middle class careers. And I really wanted to dig in and explore what makes some young people really averse to following that trajectory and really resist the premise that if you, assimilate, you can, have the American dream. So they say, well, not only do I, not only am I unwilling to assimilate, but I don't care about the American dream. So I wanted to really figure out what makes some young people decide that so early. Because I think a lot of people sort of get disillusioned later in life. But when you're younger and you're being told just, get through school, get through college, and you'll get a good job, you kind of, most of us kind of believe it. And we just say, okay, well, I'll do what I have to do when I'm in that environment. But then some say, nope, I'm not doing it. And I wanted to figure out what makes some young people do that.
Hmm. So did you grow up in a Muslim household?
I did kind of. My stepfather was Muslim, and he was raising us for about 10 years. So about half of my life, I had that influence, but I wasn't raised Muslim per se. I became Muslim in college.
Okay. So you and your brothers went to prep schools in Massachusetts, you say?
Yeah.
Do you want to name the prep school?
I mean, I can.
I mean, is it a name that people would recognize?
People who are local to Massachusetts would recognize them. We went to the Park School and Milton Academy, and my older brother went to Buckingham Brown and Nichols, BBNN. So
Okay.
yeah, good
And
school.
so, um, obviously your parents wanted you to go to prep schools,
Right.
and prep schools are quite expensive.
Hmm.
Um, so, and were there many black students at the school, or were you
No,
like
no,
one?
especially at that time. We were very much in the minority, and that's a lot of what I deal with in the book is that experience of in the 90s being a minority in a mostly white, mostly wealthy environment and knowing that there's something different about you, but nobody will admit it. Nobody will say anything about it because it's a colorblind era, right? And so everyone thinks that the polite thing to do is to not talk about race. And so nobody's saying anything and but you still feel this way. And so what does that do to a child to not be able to name what they're feeling or to even understand why they're feeling so different? um, so that's part of what I go through. Each character has memories of their childhood growing up and sort of traces how they got to be this rebellious young man that they are today.
Yeah. I went to Georgetown for
Mhm,
undergraduate school,
mhm,
and the culture of the wealthy white person is different from your regular white person.
mhm.
If I,
Yeah.
because I went to high school with, you know, it was our high school was 60/40, 60% white, but
Mhm,
40% black. So there was no, racial, if anything, nobody messed with anybody, but we didn't have the racial animosities or discrimination or,
mhm,
I had white friends, and,
mhm,
I was in the Keyettes, which was like the key club for girls. And,
mhm,
I was in honor society. So a lot of my high school friends were white,
mhm,
even though our neighborhood was middle class black.
mhm.
But I had white friends in high school. Then I went to Georgetown, and these were different white people.
Yeah.
It's different. I mean, and they went to prep schools. That was why a lot of them went to prep schools, and that was why I was asking you about the names of them. And I remember one in particular, one of the girls on the floor, because there were only like three black, my freshman year, there were only three black females in the dorm. It was a female dorm. It was only three black females in the whole dorm. Um, and one of the girl across the hall, the white girl across the hall, she said, we had one black girl at our school, but nobody talked to her. And
Oh,
she just
wow.
said it like it was no big deal.
Wow.
This poor, and I'm thinking this poor girl went through high school and
Wow.
nobody talked to her. And see, that's a different kind of racism
Mhm,
than violence.
Right.
you know,
Right.
somebody calling you names. Being invisible can be even worse. And I mean, it's just as bad
Yeah.
when you're in this environment, and it's challenging. So that's I know exactly what you're referring to
Mhm.
when you see that they 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 recognize the race when I was at Georgetown,
Mhm.
but they would say things that were incredibly dismissive,
Yeah.
and they thought it was all right.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
didn't see anything wrong with it. You know, they would just say insulting things to your face,
Mhm.
and they did not think it was anything wrong with it. That's what made it very challenging. So I can relate to what you're saying as far as your experience. And putting it in a book is a good way to make other people aware that may not have had that experience, to make
Yeah.
them aware of just how what a culture shock it can be, but
Mhm.
also very, very debilitating. You know, it
Yeah.
can be soul crushing to a certain extent.
Yeah.
You have to figure
Sometimes
out
you
and find your
know.
way, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes from the outside, you don't know what a kid is going through, whether it's a child or a teenager, they aren't necessarily able to articulate what they're feeling. And
Right.
so from the outside, it can come across as being, unreasonable or
Or too sensitive.
too sensitive, right? Or demanding or
Yeah.
somehow defiant, all sorts of
Mhm.
behavior issues um,
Right.
because you just don't understand. So, one thing I really wanted to do was to articulate how it feels as a child and as a teen in these environments. And I think it came across pretty well. A lot of people really who didn't have a similar experience really learned a lot from reading the book and told me that they just keep thinking about it and they really felt for the characters, which was satisfying for me because I was worried that people would kind of think they're too militant or too this too that but people really could understand where they were coming from once they saw the things they had gone through, so it's been a nice reception.
Okay. Now that book came out when?
Last August, so just about a year ago.
About a year ago. Okay. So have you had any success? Like, have you gone to schools that have read the book? Have you done presentations in like high schools and
Really only
with
one,
students?
and it was a school that went up to 8th grade. So they had read sections of the book and not the whole
Okay.
thing. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, that was a good experience because it was a prep school that I was presenting at, and
Oh,
so
okay.
I was able to say, this is the kind of experience that I went through at a school just like this, and so they were able to sort of put it in context and understand that maybe some of the kids in their own classes are going through similar things.
So do you feel things have improved?
Um, in a
Just
sense, yes.
overall, like in the culture
Mhm.
of these schools, that
I
the
think,
people or like the
right.
next generations are different, or I don't know,
Yeah,
more flexible, maybe less arrogant. You know that being cloistered in that wealthy environment makes people arrogant, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
It just leads to arrogance. Because
yeah.
you really, the prep school attitude is that we're better than those other people. I even like when I was at Georgetown, there were white people there that weren't wealthy,
Hmm.
although most of the white people were wealthy.
Right.
But they looked down on the ones that were just regular, middle class
Hmm.
or working class was just, almost as bad as being black.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean, so being growing up in that lap of luxury like that makes a person arrogant, just because it breeds a sense of entitlement and superiority.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a culture, sort of a cultural process that is hard to interrupt. But I think
Yeah.
that um, the institutions themselves have changed somewhat in that I went back to Milton Academy, which is the high school I went to, and I was amazed by how diverse it was now. So, it seemed like maybe half of the students were students of color, and a lot of international students, and a lot of diversity within, the student of color um, community. And so that was encouraging to see. Um, I hope that by being exposed to so many more experiences, that the wealthy white families are also sort of having their eyes opened a little more to the different experiences that people are having. Um,
Yeah, maybe their horizons have been broadened by
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Because
I
even
would.
Georgetown's different. I mean, that's a lot different from when I was there. Because when I was there weren't that many international students. Now there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
international students.
Yeah.
So and from all over, all
Hmm.
over the world.
Yeah.
But just exposure to different people,
Hmm.
it's kind of like traveling to different places.
Right.
Even within the United States, there
Hmm.
are, places that are completely different from other places.
Yeah.
And, I encourage people to get out. And the United States is big
Hmm.
and it's a very diverse country,
Yeah.
just geographically, with the topography. Um, some places look completely different from others.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been through like Arizona or New
Mhm.
Mexico, that area of the country is completely different from anything on either coast
Mhm.
because there's no ocean, there's
Yeah.
no, uh,
And even the culture I find is very different. I'm from
yeah,
Boston. I grew up in Boston, and people who would come here from other places would say, "Oh, Bostonians are so rude and mean and cold." And to me, that was just normal. But then when I traveled both within the states, like in the South or overseas, I would be like, "Wow, people are so friendly. Why are people talking to me and being hospitable?"
yeah.
I realized,
I
oh,
only went
okay,
to Boston once, and that was my impression. It was
yeah.
cold and rude. The people were mean and cold. The weather was cold. The people were cold.
Mhm. Yep.
I've only been once, but I'm working. My co-host is on Rhonda. This is Autumn Allen, who we met
Hi,
in
Autumn.
Orleans, and
Yeah.
she's telling the amazing story about the book that she had out last year called. Show the book again because I don't have it in
All you have to
my
do.
mind. All you have to do, but the cover is so beautiful.
It
Now,
is beautiful.
who did your cover? Like,
Salam Mohammed. He's an artist that I found on Instagram, and I rushed to tell my publisher he would do an amazing job. And thankfully, he was able to put us on his schedule.
oh, okay, it's beautiful cover.
Yeah.
So, now do you have a sequel or another book coming out?
I
Uh,
am currently writing another novel that is set in the same world. So it's basically the same family, one generation later.
okay.
So that's what
You
I'm
have a
working.
title yet?
Well, what should I
You don't
say?
want to say because it's
We haven't decided 100%. We have
is it
titles
embargoed or whatever?
we have two titles we're choosing between, so
Yeah.
I'll keep
Now
it to
you have the other book, Aya's Adventure, and
Mhm.
you said you played a different role with that
Right.
book.
Yes, I
That
am
you
the
Aya.
editor. Yeah, editor and art director for Io's Adventure. And that book is coming out this month, and it's written by Ein Heath Drew and illustrated by Erin K. Robinson. And we'll be having a launch event on September 19th. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's an adventure through the African diaspora from Afro to Zulu. So it's organized by alphabet, but it's the little boy is going through different experiences. He's playing in a calypso band, and then he's visiting a Dogon village, and then he's traveling with Mansa Musa. So he's traveling through space and time, throughout the continent, the Caribbean, and even South America, and experiencing different cultures within the African diaspora. It's such an exciting adventure, and the trailer is online on YouTube.
Okay.
It's
And
kind of a history lesson and an adventure all in one.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love
It
that.
was beautifully done. I remember going through. I didn't get to go through the whole book, but I remember looking on the inside when you had brought
Yeah.
guess it was an advanced copy of it with you, and it's beautifully done. It caught my eye and Rhonda's because it was just so beautifully done. So how do you get to be like an art director for a book for publishers?
Yeah,
How do
so I went to school for children's literature. So I studied both writing for children and sort of the critical side of sort of assessing the messages that are coming through the books and that kind of thing. And then I did some internships at a publisher in Massachusetts. And after a few semesters of internships, I did some consulting for the same publisher, and then they ended up hiring me as an editor. So at this particular publisher, it's a small publisher, so the editors also art direct. Um, in
Okay.
some of the larger publishers, you have an editor for the text and an art director for the art, but we get to do both, which is very exciting. One of my best experiences for Io's Adventure was meeting with the artist and sort of talking her through different ideas for different spreads and watching her sketch in real time and sort of put characters in different places and discuss how it's looking with her. So yeah, it's you just the positions don't come up very often, so
Right.
a lot of times you have to work your way up from internship to assistantship to
It's a great way to learn the business from kind of the bottom up.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you could major in children's literature.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was a major.
I didn't know until I was like 30 something. And I heard someone say that they were at a children's literature symposium at this school and at a university in Boston. And it's like, wait a minute. Adults can study children's literature? Because at that time I was homeschooling my kids and I was having trouble finding books that I wanted to share with them. And so I jumped right on it and applied. It was a graduate program. So typically as an undergrad, you can take some classes in children's literature, but the real
Of a
specialization would be as a
concentration.
graduate children.
It
Okay.
makes sense though.
It does.
I'm guessing with children's literature, you're not just learning how to write it, but you're learning maybe how to choose it,
Mhm.
how to reach children with different types of stories. Is that what it's all about?
Yeah, so I did a double degree. So I did a Master's of Arts in Children's Literature and a Master of Fine Arts in Writing for Children. So the Master of Arts
Oh,
was the critical side, was really using different critical lenses to analyze the different books, the same way we do in literature classes, in English major. And then the Writing for Children, that was the one that was really how to craft a story, how to, make a plot, how to edit and revise and that sort of thing. So I was able to look at it from both sides, which was really helpful.
hmm. So, the illustrations in children's books are the main thing. Uh,
One thing that we talked a lot about was how the illustrations and the words sort of come together to create something that's bigger than the separate parts. So the words don't have to describe everything that's in the images because the child is listening to the words while they're looking at the images. So they get to sort of soak it all in visually and also hear, something that's maybe a little different from what's happening in the pictures. And that's often part of the joy, of picture books is seeing, oh wait, but the words didn't say about this, but I see this puppy on every page, or something that the artist sort of added in on their own accord. So a lot of fun to figure out.
wow. And you have some other books coming out next year. So are
I
these
was just
books?
going to say the same thing. I said, it looks like 2025 is going to be a busy time for you.
I think so. Yeah. If we
So
stay.
are these books you wrote, or are these one of the ones that you did the art direction for?
So I can't quite remember what I put on the form, but
Ramadan, the one's Ramadan on
yes,
Rama Road.
Ramadan on
That's
Rahma Road. That's one I art directed and edited. Yep.
okay. And then Quasi and Nana Ruby Learn to Swim.
Yes, that's another one I edited and art directed. So those are both
Okay.
coming out from Barefoot Books in the spring.
Oh, okay. Well, in your background now, how old are your children now? You said you homeschool
Yeah, now they're 20, almost
Oh,
18.
they're
and
not small
16.
children. You know,
Yeah,
our children are always our children, but
yeah.
This is true.
did
They're
you
just not the babies. They're just our babies.
Yeah.
They are. They are. So did you homeschool them the entire time? The whole
I've been homeschooling the whole time I've had children, but occasionally one child has been in school. So one child went to school for fourth and fifth grade, another child went for 11th and 12th grade. But for the most part, we've been homeschooling the whole way. Yeah.
Okay. And then they end up going to college as well.
My eldest is in college now. Yes, she's a junior now.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. So if someone wanted to homeschool,
Mhm.
what would you say, like a piece of advice to give for a
Um,
person who is homeschooling or wanting to homeschool? Because that's becoming more common,
It is.
especially since COVID.
Mhm.
Um, Students lost so much learning and so many things happened, and it's like for them to catch up,
Right,
it's very difficult.
right.
And they get the personal touch with at home.
Yeah.
But just give like some feedback on the homeschooling experience.
Um, I mean, basically, I would have to give a pep talk because it is hard. And, you'll want to quit and you'll doubt yourself and you'll think, oh, am I doing enough? Am I doing a good job? But you're the person who cares the most about your child. And so you're going to do an excellent job, even if they're behind in a certain subject or, you didn't get to finish that curriculum or whatever it is. Um, have confidence in yourself and just realize it's pretty much full-time parenting. It's teaching a person. Education is about teaching a person how to be in the world. It's not just about putting information in their head.
I love that.
Yes.
And I think the good thing about homeschooling now is there are a lot more resources and a lot more support for
Mhm.
homeschoolers. I once even saw a group of parents who gave their homeschooled children their own prom because they didn't go to
Oh,
regular
nice.
school.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I think with having that support system, having resources for developing your curriculum has
Mhm.
actually made homeschooling a little bit easier than it used to be, say 10, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are
definitely.
more resources now. My daughter went to a private school. Let's see, she was there seventh, eighth, and ninth. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the school she went to was a classical Christian school, and it was started by homeschool families.
Oh,
So the homeschool families, they wanted to the socialization piece of it.
mhm.
And so they would be with kids who had been similarly taught. And
Mhm.
so I think it was maybe 10 families that ended up opening the school. And now it's big now. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many students, but they built their own building. They were sharing a building when she went. They were actually sharing part of a church. But
Mhm.
they built an extremely beautiful campus. They had a lot of backing. They had some private money that they were able to get. And but it was started by homeschoolers.
Yeah, I think it's
And
so.
Nice.
and they still had people who they had a league, an athletic league. Because what did you
Oh,
do for athletics with
um,
your kids?
yeah, my kids mostly did different after school programs, gymnastics and ice skating and
Okay,
whatever they were interested in at the time. Yeah,
okay,
and town sports too, like town soccer and things like that.
okay. All right. Well, we're at the end of our time. Will you show your book again, so people can, if they tuned in late, they can see this beautiful cover that was done. It's a beautiful cover. A cover can sell a book.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
it's a fun title because I'm
It
famous for saying all you have to do is
Mhm.
is.
so
Yep.
whenever I say that now my family makes fun of me. So I love the title of your book that automatically captured my attention.
Yep.
Very good.
It's
Well,
only
Autumn, it was great meeting you in New Orleans, and
Thank
thank you for being on the show.
thank you so much.
And continued success with your endeavors that you're
Thank
doing in
you.
the publishing world.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Okay,
Thank you for being here.